people had to leave Germany. And we had many people who were leaving Germany to come to Holland, and nobody really was prepared. Everybody said, well, it won't happen to Holland. It's happening in Germany, but it won't happen here.
Settled in Amsterdam very well, and we liked Holland very much. And so perhaps Holland was a very liberal and hospitable country towards foreigners, and also certainly towards Jews, and had a tradition of being pro-Jewish. And we went to a non-Jewish school, and it was a very happy time in my life between 34 and 40. These were the happiest years of my childhood.
We were assimilated into the culture. I mean, I never thought that I was Jewish. I was Dutch.
The World War broke out in 1939. Holland was neutral, and Holland was traditionally neutral. Also in the First World War, Holland was not involved in the war, and the majority of the Jewish people in Holland did not really come to grips with the potential danger. They didn't think of a German invasion to Holland.
When the war started on May the 10th, we were woken up very early in the morning, and well, you can read accounts from that far and wide. But it was a fantastic, beautiful day. The apple blossoms were in bloom as they never had bloomed beautifully in our garden, and we heard the buzzing of the airplanes. And at first we thought that there were just maneuvers, exercises. But then there was this, the anti-aircraft from the Hook of Holland, which is at the end of the waterway from Rotterdam to the North Sea. You could see that there was shooting and all these puffs of the shells bursting in the air. I was 16 years old, and I remember that I was so kind of irate and excited that somebody would just, invade your country without any pretext, nothing whatsoever.
The large amount of German army what pulled into Holland with huge convoys of trucks and soldiers just standing there, hanging around, and I don't think as a kid I realized, what this whole thing entailed, meant, what the seriousness of this whole thing is. What really, I think, impressed me the most was the dead animals that I saw laying in the fields, and the destruction that bombs really do.
At that stage, actually, people hoped that somehow life will return back to the normal routine within, under German occupation. Of course, rationing and all these kind of things started. And the first year was a year of, again, evasion and flight from reality. But during that year, the Germans actually, they tooled up how to organize the extinction of the Jews in Holland, like they did in the other occupied countries. The first step was that all Jews had to register.
Jews couldn't use public transportation anymore, could only shop between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. There was curfew at 8. Radios had to were collected from Jews.
And there were very clear regulations that every Jew had to sew, not with a pin, to sew on his coat or on his dress or on his jacket the Jewish yellow star. And I'll never forget the first day when we had to go into the street with this star, and everybody's looking at us, and at that time the Dutch population, part of the Dutch population, out of identification, they put on them many people themselves this star. And there were lots of manifestations of identification of the Dutch population with the fate of the Jews. And this was a great source of support. And the day when this law was passed that we had to discontinue as Jewish students to attend this school, the director assembled all the students, the director of the school assembled all the students and gave a great speech in support of the Jewish students and against this law, and very, very, very supportive. And from this year, 1942, every year we got a birthday card into the concentration camps.
During the night, one always could hear, remember there was a curfew, and one could hear how the trucks went around collecting people. And in the morning, one heard this one was arrested and this one was arrested.
Germans were just closing up 10 block square and coming in with their trucks, and had Jews from Westerbork, young fellows, carrying the people out, what they brought to Amsterdam, and what the density of the raid was. And they knew right away, if in one day like 20 kids or 10 kids disappeared, that was a raid. But if 3 kids didn't come, they were in hiding.
And the way those Germans treated those children, again, on a sunny day like today, at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're on your way to work and you see on the sidewalk adult males laughing and joking around while they're picking up small children by their arms, their legs, their hair, and throwing them in a truck. It helps you believe that they could do anything at all. There were 2 women who attacked the Germans, tried to stop them, and they were thrown on the truck too. And that was when I decided to become more active, shall we say.
When I walked once on the street, a priest came to me and said, "How do you think you can save your life?" And I said, "The only way that I can save, that the Jews can save the life, that the not Jewish people take us in and that we are hidden." And the next day, my English teacher came and he said, "I have a place for you to go." So I went with the bicycle and we drove 70 kilometers, and he brought me to a woman that I know from my hometown, and I was hidden there.
I was one of the last kids in my class that went to hiding. I went in 43, and I would say we started with a class of 60 kids, and we were left maybe 10 kids.
There were different ways of going into hiding. There was Anne Frank's way, where Anne Frank's father had very carefully arranged for these 2 rooms in his factory to be occupied by himself, his wife, his 2 daughters, and 4 other people. And the Gentiles who supplied them with food and clothing and news from the outside world came in every day or every other day or something like that. They did not live with them.
So every season would pass by, from winter to spring, from spring to summer, and summer to fall, and fall to winter, one year after another. And I was 14, I was 15, I was 16, and I never had any fun.
Do you know the day of the week?
Sometimes we did and sometimes we didn't. It was, sometimes it depended very much. We would listen to Radio Orange, which was underground. We had a radio that was underground. And the farmer occasionally would let us listen. And then at 6 o'clock at night, it would be Radio Orange from England. And that was only our way of knowing what was going on in the world. Constantly being trapped, can't get out. I'm stuck, and if I go out, I'll be killed. So there was always a fear. The fear of never getting out.
Never.
Was I ever getting out? Who knew? Was there any hope that we were going to survive? One. Was there a hope that we ever would be liberated? We hoped, but it went from year to year.
I was very lonely, and I was a young girl, and I was a very outgoing girl, and I was very sport-minded, and I was very locked up in that house. I couldn't go out at all anywhere. And not far of us, where I was hidden, that was in the Bild, it was not far from Utrecht, was another Jewish family hidden by a lawyer, a woman lawyer. And she said, why don't you come and visit this family? And I was very glad. I went there, and I didn't look so Jewish. I could have really go out for not Jewish. And I went there, and when the moment when I was there, the police came.
There was something very frightening and uncertain and insecure about the whole atmosphere. I guess that's an understatement, considering that here you have these people dressed up in military uniform with big rifles pointing at you, and I remember that we were rushed, that we didn't have any time to get anything together. And then I remember we were taken in some kind of a vehicle, I guess it was a truck, to a place where many of the other Jews were gathered.
Everybody in Holland went first to Westerbork, and from there they were sent to Germany.
Now, you got to Westerbork. What did you see?
A train with full with people, and people who live in the camp were helping the people off the trains with the children, and it was a mess.
But Westerbork, I think, was, or my memories of it were still, compared with what was to come, not that it was normal, but you know, it was not a death camp. And I guess my worst memories of Westerbork was just the fearfulness of losing my mother and my father, and also, you know, the pervasive cold.
There was just nothing to do there. It was like a prison yard, really, exactly what it was. I guess today some of the kids would say, I'm bored. There was just nothing to do. And it was filthy. And one of the worst things I remember, the toilets, well, of course there were none. They were basically an outhouse with little holes. My father used to call them egg racks, where you put a dozen eggs in, and with no discrimination between male or female. And I guess at one point you don't care anymore. And you know, no trauma to squeeze or anything. It was just no facilities whatsoever. So I remember my mother always having this unending fight to try and keep us clean, which was hopeless, but she kept trying.
There were a lot of rats there, and the rats at night used to kind of run across your bed and across your face.
Westerbork was a assembly camp from which the Jews were deported for what they call resettlement.
I don't remember speaking a lot to my brother, but I remember feeling always very close to him and very protective. It was like the two of us against the world.
My father knew the trains to the east were hopeless. Again, no one really wanted to believe what was happening, but it was hard to ignore the evidence. And at some point you believed the rumors. And my father became convinced that any train to Treblinka, Auschwitz, or Theresienstadt was the end.
I guess anyone who's been through the Holocaust remembers trains, and that life evolved around the arrival and departure of trains. And in Westerbork, I think the train was almost in the middle of the street and came on the same day every week. I think it was Tuesday or something, the beginning of the week. I remember a lot of discussion about, you know, trains and lists and people being on the list and off the list, et cetera, et cetera. And that one day we were on the train.
They threw us in a freight train with perhaps 80 people. And straw on the floor, and I think a little bathroom, something that a hall that we could go to the bathroom, I think. I don't know exactly, but it was very bad. No food. And we drove 3 days and 3 nights to that camp.
We arrived in the middle of the night, which I think they did all the time purposely. And by this time, you know, when you had to jump outside from the wagon, and the only thing you heard in this terrible confusion, harass, harass, lost, lost. And they stood you in lines of 5. And I didn't even realize it, that, you know, they were looking at us and that people went this way, that way. I didn't realize. For me, it was absolutely, you know, the confusion was so terrible that I didn't realize anything of what was going on. I just knew I was holding on one side to my mother and the other side to my sister. And fortunately, nobody separated us. Mm-hmm. So that we were, you know, we were taken. And as we were walking in this terrible confusion with dogs and with German officers all around, they put us in a line and they started to march us. And in this darkness, I saw all these lights, I mean, things going on, you know, like they had a fire, really, all around. And, but the confusion was so terrible. And all barbed wires all around.
Did you know where you were?
No, I didn't see a sign saying Auschwitz. I didn't know where I was. They just opened the place and said harass and jump out and leave everything, put everything, just leave everything there and you will find it.
So we had to get undressed and we get shaved. All the body hair get shaved. And then we had to take a shower. Then we get naked over the street to another barrack. But when I was shaved, and you come in around the corner in the other hall, and you see all those bald people. I thought they were all men. I was naked, but then you see it were women. It's so terrible. But then on the eyes you recognize each other. All bald, everybody. Then we had to get a shower, and all I get was a cotton dress without sleeves and a pair of booty shoes. That was all my clothes. Nothing else. That was in November 44.
To describe an inferno, it's just impossible to describe the terror, the dark night, and the dogs, and the other. I felt frozen. I didn't think it was possible. It just didn't seem possible. It just knocked on your consciousness, and you couldn't let it in. There was a screaming. There was the couples and there was an insane screaming. You hear this in an insane asylum. And dogs barking and these inhuman guys standing there. And children crying and dark and ugh. And the next thing it just couldn't be understood. It couldn't be even incorporated. It was the end of the world.
I and my sister and my mother, we were absolutely dazed. I don't know how other people were, but we were, it's like somebody hit, I don't even consider it hit you over the head. It just, something that the disbelief of this thing, of a day, an hour in Auschwitz, like it must be when people talk about, when you read Dante's description of hell, I think that really he must have had a terrific imagination, because it was something close proximity, even worse.
The gas ovens were right nearby, and the smoke pushed out like an angry fist day and night. After 3 months, we were 10,000 in that camp. After 3 months, those who had preceded us were gassed. So we knew when our turn came, because Germans are very orderly.
But if you had a big shoelace and somebody was walking around and their shoes were falling off, and I don't know, with a piece of glass, or somebody got a spoon that he made it sharp, and we could cut off a piece of string and give to the next woman that, and she could tie her shoes and look more presentable in the morning, because every morning we lined up on the place, and the SS came and they looked over, and if somebody didn't look good, not that anybody looked good, but if somebody looked like, you had to look, you have to stand up straight and your head high and show that you still have the strength to work, that they can pump it out of you for another month or 2 months. And this was, I think that woman gave me a lot of courage, seeing that there is, because there were so many people that they downgraded you. And yet if you find somebody that could encourage you, could give you, look up to, so you felt there's still good people outside and we're gonna live through it. I wanted to live. I wanted to know what married life is. I mean, we were philosophizing with my friend who is in Israel. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. And my other friend, and we would sit in Auschwitz and talk, and I said, God, we didn't live. We want to get married. We want to know the feeling what it is to make love to a man. We want to know what it is to have a child.
The train left Auschwitz and they were playing, I remember, wonderful music and orchestra, an all-woman orchestra. And it was like a very festive occasion, except I could hardly walk and see. I was dazed, really.
How long had you been there?
In Auschwitz, we were there about 2 months. 2 months, but as I told you, it looked to me like this was eternity. Mm-hmm.
I remember being on this cattle car, and I remember it just being dark and crowded, and the door being slammed, and no lights except whatever would come through the cracks. And I don't know how many, it may have taken a couple of days. My next vivid memory was arriving at Bergen-Belsen.
That at Belsen, near the end, that I didn't say very much, and my parents confirmed that I very rarely talked, and I became a silent sphinx. And I think that part of it was, somehow all the strength was taken from you, and all that you could do was silently watch what was happening around you, and there was just nothing more to say or do.
I remember always walking around and learning how to count on bodies, but it was perfectly unremarkable. The bodies in the morning, people were dead. Either the person you slept with or they just collapsed. This was a constant kind of thing. I mean, people were literally dropping like flies. And it was totally unremarkable because it was part of the existence there.
I saw people dying around me everywhere, of hunger, of illness. I lived, and that perhaps, I don't remember other people telling me, but I lived right across from us with a charnel house filled with corpses. Not just the inside, but overflowing all over. There were corpses all over. I walked beside dead people, and after a while it just got to be so that one noticed, and one had to say to oneself, I'm not going to see who it is. I'm not going to recognize anyone in this person who is lying there. And it got to the point where I realized that I had to close my eyes to a number of things. And otherwise I would not have survived even at that time, because I saw people around me going mad.
I couldn't persuade my sister to get up. My mother wasn't getting up. It was like the end of the road.
Then, of course, I remember the mass graves and people just being thrown on these graves. And I remember that for a while there was a quota that a certain people had to die every day or every week, and that if not enough people died, that the Germans felt that they had to take some other measures. And I remember a lot of conversation about that, because Belsen, even though it didn't have gas chambers, although someone said it had some kind of a, well, it didn't have gas chambers, it had a crematorium, but I mean, it was really a camp where most people literally starved to death. And apparently they had, as the records later showed, a very organized, methodical projections about after a certain amount of months or years, there would be nobody left. So it was, I think the pervasive feeling in all those camps was that it was everybody's turn sooner or later, and it was just a matter of when it was going to be your turn.
My sister had typhoid, and I saw the way she suffered laying there because the dirt, there was no water for the 2 weeks before the liberation.
No
And
water
I
at all?
don't mean water to wash oneself, water to drink. The hunger was in an indescribable way. The deaths were piled up.
It was so serendipitous. I don't think there's any answer to why we survived and other people died. It was truly the luck of the draw.